Okay, it looks like everyone is connected to their audio. So thank you for joining us for this session this afternoon. And thank you to Stu Skinner from Changing Horizons for delivering it. And just before we sort of, you all joined us, Stu, myself and Kath were sort of talking about, I suppose one thing that's come out of this pandemic is a much greater awareness that we all have of mental health, and sort of trying to understand how we can create safe places for people to talk about that. So it's really good to see so many of you sort of engaged with this session. And I think without further ado, I'll hand over to Stu to talk about this and deliver his session. Thank you, Stu.
Thank you, John. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me. I guess I thought quite a lot about what to deliver and what to say on this session. I got quite a lot of guidance from people within Mountain Training Association and people with vested interest in the mental health and the outdoors. And I think with everything that's gone on this year and the fact that we have now transitioned this conference online, I just really wanted to create a space where I could give you the opportunity maybe to talk about mental health and some of the things that are concerning you around mental health, and maybe some of the things that you foresee in your role in your current capacity with regards to mental health. I guess I'll start off by giving you a bit of background about who I am and why I'm so passionate about mental health in the outdoors, and particularly the mountains. And again, this is something I've been encouraged to share with people from Mountain Training Association. I don't really particularly like talking too much about myself, but I was quite privileged to grow up had a very privileged upbringing. I was born and raised in Hong Kong. I moved to Weymouth when I was 15, and life was pretty easy. It was pretty good. And when I was 19, I went to the US and I worked in a summer camp out there. And that kind of really introduced me to the world of outdoors, to kayaking, to hiking, to climbing. And I just had the most incredible summer, just working with young people and coaching. And I didn't know what mental health was, but I was incredibly happy. But sadly, at the very end of this, tragically, I went through a very traumatic experience, which also brought up some childhood trauma. And I went back to England just with this trauma. My parents had by that point moved to the Middle East. All my friends had gone to uni, so I was very much alone. And this trauma completely changed my life. It tormented me. I couldn't get rid of these traumatic images. Whereas I was once a happy, confident, outgoing young person, suddenly I lost all my confidence, my self-esteem, my self-worth. I became anxious of everything, of social situations, of people, and I suddenly started self-harming, which I didn't know anything about. I mean, this is going back over 20 years ago. I thought only goths self-harmed. It wasn't something that was anyone's radar, and that was quite terrifying and quite scary. But I'm sure all of us have banged our toe at some point or stubbed our knee. Our typical reaction is to shout out in pain or maybe swear. And from that moment that happens, your thoughts are temporarily disturbed. And that's what self-harm was for me. But it was still terrifying because I didn't know people who did these things. And when I finally did get the courage to speak to a GP, she said, you're clearly an intelligent person. Why are you doing something so stupid? So I completely shut off from the world and getting help. And I went to uni, and that was fine for a while, but mental illness, it was always there. It was not something I could escape. And it cost me my relationship, it cost me the career that I wanted in the Foreign Office. And at the age of 25, I attempted suicide. And during all this time, I also lost my best friend to suicide. And, we were brothers in arms, we played rugby together, but we never spoke about mental health. We talk about physical health and our hopes and dreams, but yeah, for some reason, and for a reason a lot of other, particularly men, don't feel comfortable sharing, we couldn't share what, our darkest secrets. And for 16 months, I was pretty much in and out of hospital, heavily medicalized. I couldn't really leave the house because I was so anxious. But then I had a friend who was going on a 4,500 mile bike trip through Southeast Asia. And he said, why don't you come join me? And I guess that was the light at the end of the tunnel moment for me. So I went on this big 4,500 mile bike trip through Southeast Asia, and it completely changed my life. And I guess I came away from this wanting to facilitate experiences for other people. So I decided to become an expedition leader, and I did my mountain training. My mountain training. I can actually Phil George, who's actually the one who did my mountain training for me over 20 something years ago, well, 15 years ago now, I'd say. And I went to Belize and I did an expedition leader course. which was great. And I decided that this is what I wanted to do. But I got told afterwards by my instructor and the organization, they said, Stu, well done, but you will not get a career in the outdoor industry or as an expedition leader because of your mental health diagnosis, which is bipolar disorder and PTSD. So I thought, screw you, I'm going to prove you wrong. So I went and hiked 2,200 miles across the US, and spoke about my experiences of suicide with the BBC, hiked the Appalachian Trail successfully, and that really gave me the confidence to become, I guess I completed my mountain leader training and have gone on to lead over 50 expeditions worldwide, and now act as a mental health consultant for World Challenge. But still, even after leading over 10 trips for one organization, when they found out I had a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, they became quite outraged and said, Stu, why didn't you declare this? And I said, well, I don't feel the need to, because I manage it, it's fine. And they said, well, Stu, you need to think about the safety of the children. I was like, what do you mean? I said, well, you've got a diagnosis of bipolar. So they saw I had a diagnosis, mental health condition, and therefore I must be dangerous, that I'm not as competent, or I cannot lead groups safely. And I guess I've dedicated my life to kind of normalizing conversations about mental health, also challenging the stigma of mental health. And the very first expedition I led, I had a young person getting bitten by a snake, I had a broken arm, I had 2 helicopter casualty evacuations, and all my first aid training kicked in, because we go through these first aid courses and we're put in stressful situations on first aid courses. But on this, I also had a young person who the stress of the expedition triggered her anorexia. Another young person started self-harming, and one young person started struggling with suicidal thoughts. And I had no idea what to do other than my own experiences of mental ill health. And I thought, well, we kind of really need something called mental health first aid, because I think the toolkit to work with people who are going through these things. And we can't pretend away mental illness. It happens. We've had mental health and ill health since the dawn of time. It'll always be part of our society and our communities and the people we work with. So I really felt like we needed to address that. And that's why I became a mental health first aid instructor. And I've really been trying to drive it in the industry ever since. So I'm going to talk about the aims of mental health first aid. I'm just going to try and share the screen quickly. And the aims of mental health first aid are very much the same as a first aid course. It's not about making people psychiatrists, doctors, talking therapists. It's not about diagnosing people and saying, I think that person's got depression or schizophrenia, because that's deeply unhelpful. It really is to provide that initial help to preserve a life where someone might be at risk to themselves. That could be self-harm, it could be an eating disorder, both of which have skyrocketed in the last 8 years and have skyrocketed during the pandemic, particularly in times of lockdown, and being that initial help. Because what we do know from research, and it's the same, with first aid, early intervention enables faster recovery. And I think the problem in current society is we always talk about the NHS in crisis. We talk about mental health services being in crisis. But for me, one of the reasons why they are in crisis, because too often we wait till a person is in crisis with their mental health till they get help, or they wait till they're in crisis. And for me, mental health first aid is really about kind of recognizing those early warning signs and kind of being that initial help, and then guiding that person to the more appropriate professional help. And yes, the mental health services are under stress. There are a lot of organizations that can support people with their mental health, and they might not need those services if we can get that early intervention. And I think mental health is, if anyone's gone through mental ill health, and if anyone has known someone who's, died by suicide, it's kind of like that ripple effect. It really not only impacts on the person that's going through it, but it can devastate communities. The feelings and impacts of someone going through a mental health crisis, it really permeates and affects everyone around them. And sometimes we need to support those people who are supporting other people. And like I said, for me, one of the big reasons why I'm so passionate about talking about mental health and trying to start conversations about mental health is because of the stigma, and it exists. I've talked with hundreds, if not, over 1,000 outdoor leaders, instructors, and still I get many of them saying, look, Stu, I've been through this, or I have a diagnosis of that, and kind of still afraid to talk about their own experiences or actually admit they've got a mental health diagnosis or condition because of the stigma that you're not as competent or able, or you're somehow be unsafe to lead groups, even though some of the, you know, the greatest leaders in the world history have, like Churchill and Abraham Lincoln, have famously suffered from mental ill health. And for many people, the shame and stigma of mental ill health is actually worse than the illness itself. Stigma stops people from getting help. Stigma stops people from talking about what they're going through. And ultimately, stigma kills. Phrases like man up have been deeply damaging. It's kind of the idea that we can man up. I think that's what killed my best friend. And I guess it almost kind of led me to, well, I guess it led to my suicide attempt as well. And for me, we can challenge stigma just by having open conversations and by kind of having normalized training in the industry as well, just to say, look, we're okay with mental health. We're not afraid of it anymore. And also some of the benefits of it, of running these courses, is it's helped people become more aware of their own mental health. Like, it still baffles me that growing up in school, I had physical education, I had sex education, but I had no kind of mental health literacy or emotional literacy. So when I started going through these things, I had no idea what to go to do. I had no idea what I was going through. So how can I manage something I didn't even know what I was going through? So, you know, I've had lots of emails from people saying, hey, Stu, you know, because of this course, I kind of recognized a bit myself in it, and I'm now getting that help that I finally need. Anyways, like I said, I really want to give you as much, I guess, space to talk about mental health. So actually going to put you into breakout rooms. I think Kath's going to help me with that one. So I'd just like you to have a conversation in your breakout rooms about what mental health means to you. What does that term mental health mean to you? Not interested in World Health Organization definition or jargonistic language. I just want to know what mental health means to you. So just going to give you just over 5 minutes. And if Kath could put you all into breakout rooms, if that's all okay. I guess it would be nice to invite any feedback. So I don't know if anyone can remember their room numbers, but can anyone from maybe breakout room 5 share what they discussed?
I think Sam, you're talking, but you're on mute. Yeah.
I've just unmuted. I was in room 5 with a couple of chaps, and we were just sort of talking about our understanding of it all. And I was talking very much about how I don't really have very much confidence in dealing with this subject matter. Mm-hmm. It's not as straightforward. And one of the examples that was brought out by one of the other participants was, you know, like if you're just dealing with, for example, a first aid incident, it's quite linear. We all know what to do. We're quite comfortable and we sort of slip into it. And I'll hold my hands up straight away and say that in this particular sphere, yeah, I'm not confident enough to be able to deal with it if it did happen. I'd have an idea of what I think I should say and do, but yeah, it makes me quite nervous, if I'm honest. And that was the sort of takeout from what we were discussing.
Yeah, thank you for your honesty, Sam. What about someone from another breakout room? You can wave your arms if I can see you. Anne Barrowman, yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Yeah, in terms of our definition, I was with Mark, and we kind of saying that kind of mental health for us was not being able to cope with the situation. That's our simple one, mentally with the situation. However, not being able to cope was, and we talked more and more about that. Mental health seems to there seems to be more and more people in the outdoor industry that have got mental health, because I think outdoors does help people and they're more attracted to that. But as such, I know my role is looking after the trainees at our centre, and more seem to be coming with mental health issues, and it's how to help and support them. And I know from an Amy workshop I went on mental health, because I was struggling what to do. The analogy he gave us when you're trying to help is a bit like a lifesaver, and as a lifesaver, the last resort is getting too close because you get pushed under, and that's what was happening to me. And he was saying, yeah, the best help you can give is by throwing the rope, keeping that distance so you can help and support without getting too close. So yeah, that's we were kind of discussing that as well.
Cool. Thank you, Anne. Like I said, I think with mental health, there's still a lot of people think that, mental health is something that they have, and that is, something that we all have. And I think a lot of times when we talk about mental health, people jump into mental illness. So things like depression, anxiety, not being able to cope. Whereas for me, and mental health is very much our thoughts, our feelings and behaviors. So some people can be, talk about our ability to cope, and they'll come up with, your ability to enjoy life and think positively and be resilient and cope with life's demands and stresses. But for me, mental health is very much our thoughts, our feelings and our behaviors, and they're very much interlinked. So what we think really affects how we feel and act. And then we know anxiety is based around unhelpful thinking patterns. So I might think the worst of the situation. I might think I did terribly in a job interview. And that might make me feel a bit nauseous and a bit down or a bit upset or frustrated. And that might mean that I don't chase up with that job application, or I might not go for another job interview. But on the positive side, if we're thinking positively, that kind of creates more positive emotions. We have more self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence, and that's going to really impact on our behaviors. And I'm pretty sure we've all seen this when we've worked with people, that people who are feeling good or thinking positively tend to act with more confidence and more likely to partake and engage and interact. And it is very much kind of a cyclical relationship between these three areas. And people who are experiencing good mental health, like I said, will have positive thoughts, high self-esteem, self-worth, confidence, and more likely to get engaged and interact. And we'll see that in their behaviors. But obviously, on the flip side, to someone who's experiencing poor mental health or low mental health will tend to have more negative thoughts, less self-worth, less self-esteem, won't be feeling so great, a bit down in the dumps, less energy, lethargic, maybe not sleeping as well, sleeping too much, eating too little, eating too much, and not really engaging and living kind of the active and fulfilling life that most people would like to go through. I really want to kind of hit home that message. Mental health is something that we all have, and for me, I see health as being like a three-legged stool. So we have social health. And I think the reason why a lot of people's mental health has been impacted during particularly lockdown is because we're not having the opportunities to engage and interact with people. And speaking to John, I think a lot of outdoor leaders, particularly mountain guides and mountain instructors and expedition leaders, maybe struggle with their mental health sometimes because it's quite a lonely, isolating job. And obviously our physical health, I think all of you are fully aware of what physical health is and how to manage that. And then we have mental health on that third leg. And if we're kind of leaning back on just two of them and neglecting one of them, that's going to put a strain on the other two. So if we're not looking after our physical health, that's going to impact on our mental and social health, and vice versa. But because of the stigma around mental health, because a lot of people don't have an understanding of what it is, I think many people aren't really looking at managing their mental health. I'm going to ask kind of a brave question in just a moment, but it will be anonymous and through a poll. But there's also an annotate button on this, so it'd just be interesting to see where everyone is kind of on their mountain leader journey. So I'm just going to share that image. Sorry, it should come up. Can everyone see that? Okay, Kath, can you see that? Can everyone see the annotate button? Has everyone got access to the annotate button on Zoom? And then if you click on stamp, and then if you could just stamp where you are on that on the mountain leader pathway.
Anyone who can't annotate, if you stick it in the chat, I'll add it for you.
Cool. Sorry, it'd obviously be amazing to kind of get everyone the opportunity and chance to introduce themselves, but by the time we all did that, it would be at the end of the session. So obviously got quite a nice mix of experience here. MIA, okay, that's very nifty. Okay. Cool. Well, thank you for that. Just give everyone a couple of seconds just to finish up there. So we can see a nice diverse range of backgrounds. If everyone could just put where they are on the in the UK using the same function, that'd be fantastic.
This is going to start testing my geography skills.
As I said, I'm born and raised in Hong Kong, so my UK geography is not great, but I can see obviously we're seeing a lot of people where we'd expect to see them when it comes to kind of the outdoor mountain world. Oh, excellent. Thank you very much for that. Like I said, really talk about mental health, and I guess we're going to bring up some polls because I do think it's quite interesting to see where we're all coming from, what part of the UK, where we are on our mountain kind of leader pathway. But I mean, this poll is very anonymous, but I think it would be very interesting to see where people are with their mental health. So Kat's gonna bring up a poll, and just if you could put on a scale of 1 to 10, how you're feeling today. So kind of maybe where your mental health, how you're feeling is on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being the worst you've ever felt, and then 10, the best you've ever felt, if that's okay.
The other person on the mountain training account, because you're logged in, I can't access the polling. Sorry, Stu, I might not be able to access it.
There's always going to be a few tech issues just to throw in the mix. Okay, I'll put you into breakout rooms then. So I guess we had a conversation about what mental health is, and like I really want to stress, for me, it's just thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and it could be, everyone can experience maybe good mental health and also maybe poor or low mental health. And as I was saying to Kath earlier, and Kath was bringing up earlier, I don't think there's been anyone who hasn't maybe experienced some kind of poor mental health at some point in their lives, just as the same with physical health. All of us have maybe gone through a cold or a sprain. Like mental health is really fluctuates, it's fluid, and there are no guarantees when it comes to our mental health. But it'd be great if you could go back into your breakout rooms and have just a 5-minute chat about why should we address mental health? Why should we talk about mental health? Why should we maybe get some training around mental health? I think Sam raised that really good point as, just maybe not having the confidence, and it is, a little bit tricky and different to physical first aid. So if we have a 5-minute chat in your breakout rooms about why should we address mental health, and that would be fantastic. Thank you. Cool. Well, I think Sam definitely touched upon maybe one of the reasons earlier, and very brave and honest in his answer. Would anyone want to share what they discussed in their groups? If you just kind of wave your arms in the air or maybe put something in the chat function.
Certainly we talked about, certainly from a negative perspective to start with, but actually I've just been thinking, if I turn all these things on their head, it actually makes it a very, very positive thing, because if our mental health is in a really positive state, it allows us to achieve lots and lots. But some of the negative things we talked about, it's affect about how we do our job as in terms of safety, decision making, our technical ability can be impaired, ability to teach, and certainly our kind of relationship with peers, group, colleagues, loved ones, employers are all affected. However, as I said, on the flip side of that, it can actually accentuate those things and make them even better. So there's kind of two different kind of standpoints from it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
Anyone else like to share? You can just jump in, maybe. Yes, Sam Benson.
Yeah, just following on from what Mark was saying. Hello, Mark, by the way. We're saying that quite often we might find that the very people that need to access the outdoors to engage and have that better mental health process, they might well decide not to actually attend because they are suffering from mental health. And we were talking about how organisations, they always have procedures to deal with things before people come. So do you declare this? Do you declare this? But quite often people might say, I can't do that, or I won't do that, because if they find out about this, I'll be treated differently. Or quite often the organisations I work for, they'll just try to put this in a safeguarding issue, and they'll just say, well, the teacher deals with that, or just send them home. So because of that, you just have that lack of potential for people to actually gain and experience the outdoors to its fullest, because they don't feel like they can engage fully. And there was another point which I've just completely forgotten. It was saying that very often when you take people into the spaces that we use, you take them away from their, I'm going to say, normal reality, their normal bubble. And quite often you get people will come out with comments and statements which are very strong and profound. And as Sam was saying, we don't have maybe the language or the literacy to be able to absorb that and deal with it in that moment in the right ways, because quite often we're in a group situation, but one person might say something to you which is incredibly important to them, and it's being able to balance that group need with that individual at the same time. Yeah, that was it.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, and I'm glad you raised that last point and remembered it. I do think the outdoors has a huge part to play in healing the country and people. I think we saw what happened in the summer. Suddenly, paddleboard sales went through the roof, inflatable kayak sales went through the roof. Like, everyone took to the outdoors, and I think lockdown has really emphasized how important outdoor activity, connection to the great outdoors is important in managing their mental health. And I'm sure everyone here has a big part to play in that. And I think that's why it's so important that we do equip ourselves with the ability, but more so the confidence to have these conversations. Because from my experience with working and having conversations and training people mental health who work in the outdoor industry, I think a lot of us are naturally gifted in it anyway. We already have those skills. It's just more to kind of give a bit more confidence and maybe crystallize what we already know. But we talk about safety and we talk about duty of care. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. I mean, we have a duty of care. I mean, I think when we talk about health and we talk about hazards, certainly when I first started in the industry, and still when I work if I'm leading on the mountains or I'm leading an expedition, we talk about hazards, but they're always physical hazards and what we do to kind of manage the physical risks and what control measures we put in place. But there is the hazards that exist for people's mental health as well. And I've led for so many organizations now, and when we talk about health and safety briefings, we say put on a hat, drink water, kind of wear the right equipment. But very rarely, in fact, I don't think I've ever seen anyone kind of put any kind of mental health in there. Like, how should we look after our mental health in the mountains? What should we do to manage our mental health in the mountains? What are some of the risks that might put someone's mental health at risk? And how can we mitigate that? How can we control that? So I think we need to see change in there, because duty of care and health includes mental health just as physical health. And the government have now released this Thriving at Work core standards, 6 core standards which people should meet when it comes to their mental health. And mental health issues are common. We know that, the statistic that most people throw about is 1 in 4 will experience some form of poor mental health a year. We now know that's gone up to about 56% of the UK population will experience some form of mental ill health every year. Suicide is now the leading cause of death for men under the age of 50 and women under the age of 35. We know that depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide. So, we just can't put our fingers in our ears. Mental illness is a reality. And like I said, it's always going to be there. And for a lot of people, they have to learn how to live with this condition. It's not something that can be cured. It's not something that just, is temporary. For many people, they have to manage it. And like I said, for me, the mountains has such a big part and play a huge part in helping people manage their mental health. And, I think if people have gone through a difficult time, if they've gone through depression or severe mental illness, you can take medication, which might help. You might see a therapist, but those things don't give you back your self-confidence. They don't give you back your self-worth or self-esteem, things that mental illness robs people of. But the mountains and individuals like yourself, you can help people find those things again. And that's why I think it's so important that we do address it. And I think a lot of people, Sam talked about it earlier, from my conversations with people when I've done research to try and get funding, I think so many people when it comes to mental health are so afraid of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. They do nothing. And for me, doing nothing, that can cost lives. And something just as simple as a question about the weather, that can be, enough to keep someone alive. And for me, that last point is just, it's the right thing to do. Like, we need to start having conversations about mental health. We need to put mental health on the same par as physical health. But because at the moment, there's a huge disparity in how we deal with mental health and physical health and how we see and treat mental health and physical health. And I think we kind of need to put some balance in so they are, as equal as one another. Most of the work I have done when it comes to mental health first aid has been with World Challenge. Sorry, I don't know why that's not come up full screen. Hopefully you can see those tables and figures. So I have now delivered mental health first aid to, I'd say, over 370 people who work at World Challenge. And I'd say I've now delivered mental health first aid to over 1,000 outdoor instructors, and also worked with a number of outdoor centres. And as you can see here, people's confidence and knowledge on average has doubled for having done the course. But for me, like I said, it wasn't so much just what people learned on the course or crystallized things that they didn't know about and maybe gave them an open forum to talk about self-harm and eating disorders and schizophrenia and bipolar. I think the best thing that came out of it for me, and the thing that people most appreciated most on the course, was it finally gave them a safe space to talk openly and candidly about mental health, to have conversations that perhaps they would have shied away from before, or maybe not felt safe or confident to have. And like I said, I think that was a true, like, the real positive came out of it. And Stu Morris, who's the global operations director for World Challenge, he said, it's, you know, it's great. You know, we're finally not afraid of mental health. We're okay to take people with mental health conditions overseas on expedition. We're okay to have expedition leaders who have mental health conditions. And like I said, it also kind of breaks down that barrier. So going back to maybe people not wanting to access the outdoors or work with an organization, if you have people who are trained in mental health, and I'm not just saying it has to be mental health first aid, but just mental health in general, if you kind of let people know that you're having these conversations and that you have mental health first aiders, where you have physical first aiders, it kind of hits home that message. Look, you know, it's okay. You know, we do care about your mental health. We can look after your mental health, and you're not going to encounter stigma, because if you've got mental health training, it's saying we're addressing the stigma. We believe that mental health is on par and as important as physical health. So it can create real cultural change as well, which I think is hugely important. I said I was going to maybe have another conversation, but that would lead into a break. Like I said, we were hoping to bring that poll much earlier, but we were having difficulties with the polls. Someone's just asked me a question. Hi, Stu, can you outline the most common mental health situations on World Challenge expeditions? For me, I think, like I said, I've been on expedition for a long number of times. I've dealt with psychosis, where people started hallucinating on expedition. I've dealt with self-harm on quite a number of expeditions now, eating disorders. I think the most common things are anxiety, which I think a lot of us deal with anyway, because we're taking people out their comfort zones. So I think we're very good at managing anxiety in the outdoors. But I think more and more we're starting to see self-harm and eating disorders, and young people with severe anxiety disorders, maybe talking more along the lines of generalized anxiety disorder, maybe obsessive compulsive disorder, which again is on the increase. So it's more kind of focused on these kind of things that maybe were in the background before, but are coming to the forefront a lot more. So I'm going to launch this poll, and it'd be great if you could just be honest. And like I said, it's completely anonymous. I'm pretty sure all of us have done these things. We've asked our groups, you know, how are you feeling on a score of 1 to 10? If you could just do that as I launch the poll. So there's 3 questions. On a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling today? And then how you've been feeling in the last month. And then a question about how has your mental health been this year compared with last year? So I guess that's a question really asking, how's the pandemic impacted on your mental health? Like I said, this is 100% anonymous. So if people wouldn't mind just filling in that poll. I think it's relatively straightforward. I don't know if everyone can actually see the poll results, and I guess it's actually, yeah, I think, to be honest,
you have to share the results. Someone has to share the results, and then everyone can see them.
Okay, I'll just give maybe 10 seconds for that. I think the vast majority of people have now voted anyway. So if I press end it, will I be able to share that with people?
Yes,
John?
if you end it, people can't submit it anymore, and then you should be able to share it. Yes.
So hopefully everyone can see those poll results. Try and get an idea where we're all at. And like I said, I think it's really important, you know, to kind of find out where our colleagues and peers are at. So thankfully, a lot of us, the majority of us, on a scale of 7 to 10, it would look like. I'd say I'm a 6 at the moment myself. But then if we look at the last month, we can see maybe those numbers a little bit lower, where We've had some people as low as 2. Obviously, we've had the lockdown come in, 3 and 4, the most common one being 7. But, you know, it's great that people have been feeling an 8 and 9, but it does seem a lot like the last month that people's mental health has been struggling. And I think when we look at that last question, unfortunately, most people have been feeling worse. And I think it has triggered a little bit of a sadness in me at the moment to see that, you know, the impact of the pandemic has clearly impacted on people's mental health. I'd say more so than the physical health. I think the mental health implications of COVID-19 are going to be far more reaching than they are the physical ones. But that just goes to show like how mental health is so subjective and how fluid and how different it is for every people. Obviously, if you've got social anxiety, if you don't like social situations or people, which is a number of people have shared, then, you know, pandemic and lockdown can actually be a good thing for people's mental health. So I just think it really shows like how we're all on this continuum. You know, mental health is a broad spectrum, and it is fluid. It does change, you know, daily. It can change weekly, and it can change monthly, and it can change from year to year. But thank you for everyone's honesty in that. That's definitely interesting for me to see. If we just take a quick 5-minute break just to stretch your legs, maybe make a quick brew or get a quick drink, just so we're not kind of like leaving the breakout rooms and conversations later, if that's all okay. So come back in 5 minutes. Like I said, for me, this, you know, what meant the heart of mental health first aid, what mental health first aid really is, and like for me, it is just about normalizing those conversations and just making them, you know, everyday part of our life, and not being afraid to have them. So I think that's what I really was hoping and wanting. Obviously, I can't really teach first aid skills on this course. There's just simply not enough time, and I think there's also kind of personal safety around triggering issues as well. But I've been holding these check and chat sessions for World Challenge leaders, so getting, you know, on Zoom and just giving leaders the space to talk about mental health and the things that are affecting them. And I think that, yeah, I've been finding a lot of people find that beneficial. So I'm just going to put you out into breakout rooms again with the help of Kath, and just have a conversation, a 5-minute conversation about what are the pressures that are affecting you, or maybe someone you know at the moment that's impacting on your or their mental health. But it doesn't have to be on your mental health, just some of the pressures you're facing at the moment. And then we can maybe look at the relationship between stress, which is your body's response to a perceived pressure or demand, and vulnerability as well. So yeah, please just have a conversation about some of the pressures that are affecting you or that you're facing at the moment. If you don't mind putting us into breakout rooms, Kath. Is that most people back now? Okay, yeah.
Everyone should be back now, yeah.
Again, just throw your hand in the air if you'd like to share what maybe you discussed in your group. Or yes, Chris?
We did a bit of, well, I did a bit of chatting about the double-edged sword of working. I'm working at the moment because I work in education, and I'm outside teaching what I love, climbing, hill walking, yada, yada, yada. But I'm constantly aware that I feel like I'm sort of putting myself at risk, even though I don't want to not teach. But I work with teenagers who aren't really that good at the social distancing, and they're in an educational bubble with the rest of the people who are there. So I can kind of get it. But so it's a sort of stress of feeling like you're on the front line in terms of fighting a disease, but the joy of actually being able to do what you do and being allowed to do it when so many people aren't. So that's kind of a two being torn in two directions sort of thing.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. Anyone else want to share?
Yep, staff worries about redundancy, not unsure of the long-term future of businesses. We don't know, to be quite honest, and that's definitely at the back of my mind, at the back of staff's mind, who I line manage, so I have to manage that with them, and obviously it does raise anxiety, keeping staff meaningfully occupied when they're not able to work with groups, working from home, trying to keep their brains occupied, I suppose, in terms of meaningful projects that they can, development projects they can work on in readiness, and when they can come back and work with groups. I think that's been a headache for them, and also a headache for me to try and arrange to give them sufficient things to do, basically. So those are two things definitely which occupy my mind and their minds.
Yeah, definitely.
So. Got a comment in the chat. Julie agrees as well.
From the research I've been doing during the pandemic and the impact, mostly, I guess I've been looking at expedition leaders. I think it's this financial uncertainty. Do I have a career left that's really impacting on people's health? But obviously, if you're not having a job, then people are maybe lacking purpose, and that we know that that not having a purpose, not feeling like you have a purpose, is kind of one of the biggest contributors to mental illness, and particularly suicide. If you think when those mines closed down in the northeast of England, we saw suicide rates skyrocket, and also that lack of connection as well. We know that isolated communities, people who are isolated, tend to struggle with the mental health. But I think also a big thing, if people aren't working and doing the thing that they love, and it's the identity, or kind of the thing that makes you can also disappear. And I think a lot of people who work in the mountains or on the water or lead expeditions are kind of really struggling with that aspect, and like not doing the things that make them them, I guess, that how they perceive themselves. So I think this identity thing is really impacting on people's mental health as well. One thing that I guess I always use whenever I lead groups or manage people, also in a capacity as a youth worker, is this kind of idea of the stress and the relationship between stress and so kind of ideas that we all have stress in our life. We have pressures and demands, we have bills to pay, maybe kids to raise, jobs to go to. The kind of idea is we all have a stress container, and we all have different size stress containers. So the more tolerant we are to stress, the bigger our container will be. But likewise, on the flip side, the more vulnerable we are, the smaller our container is. And I think there's lots of things that are making us more vulnerable at the moment. So maybe we're not getting the support, we're not having that human connection that we did before. There's lots of uncertainty. There's been a lot of pressures and demands on relationships. Sadly, I'm one of those people whose relationship didn't survive, two people going into lockdown in a small flat, both working from home. And this anxiety around, I think you just raised earlier, Chris, am I putting myself in a situation where I might get COVID? I'm terrified of visiting my parents just in case I give COVID to them. So we've got all this stress going in. It might be financial uncertainty. It might be, not knowing how to pay our bills, and it kind of goes into our container. And it doesn't matter how big your container is. If our container is, I don't know if people can see that, can they? Sorry, it's saying no, yeah, stop share. The kind of idea is we've got too much stress going into our container, we might see emotional snapping. And I'm sure we've all seen someone snap at some point. But again, I want to stress that it's very different for different people. We all have our own stress signature. For some people, it might be an emotional outburst. They might get angry, frustrated, they might cry. But for some people, they might withdraw or isolated. I could always tell when my mum was stressed, because she always used to, hoover quite aggressively and bang all the walls as she was hoovering. And the kind of idea is that we have helpful coping strategies that kind of acts as a tap. So as that stress comes in, like we're not going to see this emotional snapping, because we can't really stop the stress that comes into our lives. We might be able to reduce them, and we might, work around accepting them. But if we've got stress coming in our lives, it's really useful to have those helpful coping strategies. I'm pretty sure most of us on here going to the outdoors, exercising, being out and about is a way we kind of manage our stress. But for some people, it's a lot harder to practice those helpful coping strategies, or people might turn to drink or drugs, or they might just bottle things up and not share things. And that kind of blocks that tap. So you're far more likely to see that emotional snapping again. Sorry, it's not really working well on the Zoom thing, but I like to think you all get the idea. So for me, this is a really useful exercise to do with people, so we can start talking, what are the stresses you're facing? What are your pressures and demands? How can we make, you and us, how can we make ourselves more tolerant to stress? And what's some of the things that we can do that can release our tap? So, if we are facing these stress, how can we empty our container? And the reason why I also like this, because when it comes to mental health, we do have difficulty kind of finding that common language. So when I've managed groups, I also know that the GB sailing team have also started using this as well. So we can say to someone, how's your container at the moment? Well, I can say, it's quite empty at the moment. I'm doing all right. But other times they can actually say, well, my container's overflowing and I really need some support. So if we kind of notice someone's container's overflowing, I think we can tell if someone's stressed. It shouldn't be a cue to be like, oh, that person's stressed, or you're a little bit stressed, aren't you? That should really be a cue or prompt to have a conversation and see how we can support them in reducing the stress that's in their container, or maybe take some of that stress out of their hands. So like I said, it's really important to try and find ways in mental health to have that common language, so people can easily share and talk about their mental health, but maybe in a different kind of way. So like I said, I think this is a very useful exercise to do with all kinds of groups and people. And again, just the people in your lives, just to try and find that common language, just so you can check in with people. To throw you back into your groups now. So what signs might we notice in someone experiencing poor mental health? So how might we be able to tell what are the signs and symptoms? It's maybe someone in crisis or someone starting to develop a mental health condition or problem. Again, I'll give you 5 minutes to have a chat about that, and then I'll show you a video. If you wouldn't mind putting into breakout rooms, please, Kath. I was getting a bit pressed for time, like rather than talk at you even more. And like I said, we're a bit time constraint. So I'm just going to show a video called "I Had a Black Dog and His Name Was Depression." There are over 100 signs and symptoms of mental health, and like for me, it's just I think we all know if someone's not quite right, and for me, that's why it's just about trusting your gut, trusting your instinct, and if we do recognize these signs and symptoms that we see, just start the conversation. So I'm just going to very quickly show this video. I'm going to put trigger warning out there. Some people, it's an incredibly useful video, but you might see yourself or a loved one, friend, family member, or someone you work with. But it's such a useful video, so I'm just going to share that now.
I had a black dog. His name was Depression. Whenever the black dog made an appearance, I felt empty and life just seemed to slow down. He could surprise me with a visit for no reason or occasion. The black dog made me look and feel older than my years. When the rest of the world seemed to be enjoying life, I could only see it through the black dog. Activities that usually brought me pleasure suddenly ceased to. He liked to ruin my appetite. He chewed up my memory and my ability to concentrate. Doing anything or going anywhere with the black dog required superhuman strength. At social occasions, he'd sniff out what confidence I had and chase it away. My biggest fear was being found out. I worried that people would judge me. Because of the shame and stigma of the black dog, I was constantly worried that I'd be found out. So I invested vast amounts of energy into covering him up. Keeping up an emotional lie is exhausting. Black dog could make me think and say negative things. He could make me irritable and difficult to be around. He would take my love and bury my intimacy. He loved nothing more than to wake me up with highly repetitive and negative thinking. He also liked to remind me how exhausted I was going to be the next day. Having a black dog in your life isn't so much about feeling a bit down, sad or blue. At its worst, it's about being devoid of feeling altogether. As I got older, the black dog got bigger and he started hanging around all the time. I'd chase him off with whatever I thought might send him running. But more often than not, he'd come out on top. Going down became easier than getting up again. So I became rather good at self-medication, which never really helped. Eventually, I felt totally isolated from everything and everyone. The black dog had finally succeeded in hijacking my life. When you lose all joy in life, you can begin to question what the point of it is. Thankfully, this was the time that I sought professional help. This was my first step towards recovery and a major turning point in my life. I learned that it doesn't matter who you are, the black dog affects millions and millions of people. It is an equal opportunity mongrel. I also learned that there was no silver bullet or magic pill. Medication can help some, and others might need a different approach altogether. I also learned that being emotionally genuine and authentic to those who are close to you can be an absolute game changer. Most importantly, I learned not to be afraid of the black dog, and I taught him a few new tricks of my own. The more tired and stressed you are, the louder he barks, so it's important to learn how to quiet your mind. It's been clinically proven that regular exercise can be as effective for treating mild to moderate depression as antidepressants, so go for a walk or a run and leave the mutt behind. Keep a mood journal. Getting your thoughts on paper can be cathartic and often insightful. Also keep track of the things that you have to be grateful for. The most important thing to remember is that no matter how bad it gets, if you take the right steps, talk to the right people, black dog days can and will pass. I wouldn't say that I'm grateful for the black dog, but he's been an incredible teacher. He forced me to reevaluate and simplify my life. I learnt that rather than running away from my problems, it's better to embrace them. The black dog may always be part of my life, but he'll never be the beast that he was. We have an understanding. I've learned through knowledge, patience, discipline and humour, the worst black dog can be made to heal. If you're in difficulty, never be afraid to ask for help. There is absolutely no shame in doing so. The only shame is missing out on life.
I love that video. I just think it's such a fantastic resource because I think people respond to imagery and it's so visual. And I think a lot of people can understand depression because it can be, for some people, quite difficult to understand. But for me, that really puts it in a way that people can understand and maybe relate to. And just want to stress that it's a metaphor for all you dog lovers out there, which there are many of us. Very quickly, I mean, this will be the last question I ask of the day in the discussion room. So say you do recognize these signs and symptoms, say you see these things in people, just love you to have a chat about how you could start a conversation. So you believe that a member of your team or a client is suffering from poor mental health. So maybe you've seen signs and symptoms that were shown in this video. How would you start a conversation about mental health, or how can you start a conversation about mental health? Because that's really kind of the mental health first aid side of things, is initiating that conversation. So very quickly put you into your breakout rooms for 5 minutes again. That's okay. Thanks, Kath. Like I said, we are getting a bit pressed for time. I put this slide up, and like I said, for me, not only can a conversation change a life, a conversation can save a life. It can start someone on a journey to recovery. And I always was a bit bemused when I moved to England from Hong Kong, you know, like this kind of ritual we go through, you know, you're right, yeah, I'm all right. You, yeah, I'm all right. And then when we tend to ask people how they're doing, we're not really asking how they're doing. So this is why Time to Change, a mental health anti-discrimination campaign, to come up with this, you know, ask twice if they respond with okay or fine, which are non-answers. And if we're more specific, so how are you feeling at the moment, or how are you coping with lockdown, that we tend to get, you know, more rounded answers, more open and honest answers. Or, you know, I've noticed that you know, you don't seem to be, a bit down, or you haven't been your usual self. You know, I just want to check in and see, is everything okay? And if they do open up, you know, like keep asking questions, open-ended questions. Also, silence is incredibly supportive. For me, silence is one of the best listening tools, because if I'm not saying anything, then that's giving that person more time to kind of, you know, process their thoughts and emotions. And it's just saying, look, I'm okay with you as you are. And going for a walk, or going for a drive, or meeting them for a coffee, that's like a great way to, an environment to initiate a conversation. The way I always frame it is, it's whenever and wherever that person you want to support feels most comfortable. That's so important. And also, so like the time, the place and setting, and how you are in yourself as well. Because if you're stressed or anxious, it's probably best you don't have the conversation until you're in a calm, centered place. Maybe some people might respond better to text as well. So make time, put away distractions. And it's Like, it's really important to realize, you know, you don't need to come up with a solution. I know we're all very solution-centered individuals, and people aren't really looking for the answers. They just want to be listened to and heard and be seen. And like I said, just need to listen and be empathetic. And I think most of you on here, I think are just naturally empathetic anyway. That's certainly my experience of working in the outdoors. And I'm just going to show a very profound and powerful short video, which comes from the Small Talk Saves Lives campaign. So this is a campaign created by the Samaritans to reduce suicide rates. And for me, it's very short, sharp, and quite poignant about how a simple question can be enough to save someone's lives.
Can't believe this weather.
No.
Can't believe this weather. Thank you. Can't believe this weather. Sorry? I said I can't believe.
The approaching train is not scheduled to stop at this station.
Can't believe this weather. Is everything all right?
Kind of like to pause it on that last point. And like I said, for me, like that's what mental health first aid is really about. It's just trusting your instinct. If you think something's up, and then just start the conversation. And, you know, don't need to go straight in there with how you're doing, how you're feeling. Like, just ask anything to, you know, open up that conversation, build some trust, build some rapport, and then, you know, just give that person that safe space to open up, and then signpost them to the right kind of help. I will put that last slide on where we can signpost people, or I think we'll have everyone's emails address. I can maybe put some signposting in there. So professional sort, most stuff does start with a GP, and I really want to stress you can take someone to accident and emergency just as you can for a physical crisis. If someone's in mental health crisis, if they are feeling suicidal, then I'd actually take them to A&E, because they will they'll get help a lot quicker, basically, because there will be consultant psychiatrists on hand. It might take a while, but at least, like I said, first aid is about, you know, preserving a life where someone might be risk themselves. And it's, if you can provide that initial help, get the right kind of support. IACT, so say someone is kind of cuts the middle person out. So say you think someone could benefit from a talking therapist, or you can benefit from a talking therapist, Google IACT and your local area. And then basically fill out a questionnaire. Someone will give you a ring, an assessment, so you don't have to see a GP to get talking therapist. And this is a much underused service because not a lot of people are aware of it. And like I said, you don't just have to rely on NHS. There's so many organizations that can provide services around mental health. So some of the big mental health charities like Rethink and Mind, particularly if you know, like debt and financial worries are a huge thing at the moment. So lots of organizations, particularly Rethink, that can offer services around debt and mental health, or bereavement and mental health. I get my counselling free of charge from a charity. So I see a counsellor once a week. I didn't go through the NHS. I went through a specialist service, a charity. So don't just rely on the mental health services like GP, A&E, the NHS. It is under strain, but also I want to stress, just because we've got a pandemic, it doesn't mean we shouldn't go to these services. You can still go see a GP if you are worried about your mental health, or you know that someone is struggling with their mental health. But it's really important that we allow people to kind of retain control. Like I said, I'll find a way to share more of that information with you after this session. But before we end up, has anyone got any questions? I think you can put them in the chat, or just kind of wave your hand in the air. I have put the links to the videos and I put in the chat function.
Stuart, I just got a question. I don't know if you were going to cover this at the end, but it's just about how people can access the sort of the mental health first aid training as well. I know you obviously deliver that yourself. I don't know if you're going to talk about that, the different courses available if people who wish to seek that out.
Yes, I really believe in standardizing just having the standard course, everyone kind of working off the same page. So mental health first aid, there is one, I guess, big course, a mental health first aid. It's licensed by Mental Health First Aid England. It was introduced and created by Australia, Mental Health First Aid Australia in 2002. Mental health first aid was brought into England by the Department of Health in 2007. It's a Mental Health First Aid England course. It's a fully accredited course. It's licensed by the Royal Society for Public Health. So you can access that by going to the Mental Health First Aid England website. I guess I deliver that course myself. I also deliver a one-day course, which is accredited by the Institute of Outdoor Learning. So that's kind of more focused on people who work in the outdoor industry. There have been some spin-offs of the mental health first aid course, but I think it's important that everyone kind of works on the same page, so to say. So there is a 2-day course, there is a 1-day course, but for me, you know, if you do a 2-day first aid course, we don't bat an eyelid. Like, we don't bat an eyelid about having to renew it every 3 years. So I think it's really important that people kind of do a mental health first aid course if they had to do a first aid course, because I think the learning is so valuable. And I think it's also helpful to have someone who works in the outdoor industry to kind of make it more relatable and more specific to the industry that we work in. So I know there's a number of people who work in the outdoors who are mountain leader trained, who also deliver the mental health first aid course, but I'm sure mountain training can pass on some of those details.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Stu. I can't see any questions. I'd just like to thank Stu so much for delivering this session. I think it's been incredibly powerful and incredibly useful. And I hope that maybe some of you already done a mental health first aid course. I myself haven't. I'm certainly looking to do one, and maybe you are too. I hope so. I hope it sort of helped us also sort of start these conversations. I guess they're already happening. But yeah, thank you very much, Stu. I thought that was really, really good. Thank you.
Yes, like I said, yeah, for me, please just, any questions, don't hesitate to contact me if you want to chat through anything. And like I said, you know, if you think someone isn't okay, if you're worried something isn't quite right with someone you know, just trust your instinct and just start the conversation and see where it goes. Because it's so important that we normalize these conversations, we have these conversations, and we keep on talking about mental health. And yeah, because I think, like I said, it's so important more now than ever. And I really appreciate everyone joining in on the session today. Yeah, deeply appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Stu. So I guess we'll be seeing you all again tomorrow morning for day 2. And I'm sure some of you, I guess, have some of the elective sessions as well tomorrow. So I guess that's the end of day 1. I've sort of, myself and Kath have sat in on all of it. I think it's been really, really useful discussions, and I can see some of the faces here. You've sat in on all these 3 sessions this morning as well, this morning and this afternoon too. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything, Guy. I see your face has just popped up.
Yeah, I've only just been able to get in at the end, but it's great to see everybody's still here after nearly 6 hours now. And yeah, all have a good break. And as I say, it's not my favourite way of running conferences, but it seems to be running pretty well all the same at the moment. So thanks very much for attending, and we'll see you all tomorrow, I hope.